So wonderful to be with you this morning. I've driven, Shabbat Shalom. I've driven by a lot of times and wondered what this sweet little place would be, and I've wanted to come, and so my first time here is through invitation, but I just have a wonderful feeling with you here this morning, so thank you. One thing that I remembered, I had forgotten, you know how you study something and then you forget it and then you remember? This will make a cameo in my drash today, but I just forgot how Jewish unicorns are. I had forgotten that, so, and in the afternoon we can talk about what I've presented here after services, or we can talk about chaplaincy. I brought a few texts that we could look at or not. We can go with the flow together. People receive immense help and healing through listening presence, as compared to being provided advice or instruction. I'm sure we've all had encounters where somebody gives us advice and we're not quite ready for it. Advice and instruction are essential to life, but learning how and when to offer others pure presence is life-transforming. This is what we teach at Esri Institute, a new philosophically Jewish yet interreligious graduate program that educates and ordains chaplains. 1 in 4 people in the United States encounter a chaplain. Pew Research surveys and Gallup reports have gathered overwhelmingly positive statistical responses to these encounters. And it is not unusual for the chaplain to be a person's first and only interaction with a spiritual leader in their lifetime during a time of distress. And this is due to the changes in society and people not being affiliated and people not having the community support that they once had via religious and spiritual life. The field of chaplaincy is not religious per se, an integrated clinical practice. It fuses spirituality, theology, behavioral science, psychology, and interdisciplinary teamwork. Educating a new model of clergy needs to meet current needs within and across traditions and cultures. This possesses urgency due to increasing levels of societal distress and isolation. When we receive instruction to build the Mishkan and tabernacle in our parsha today, it takes practical engineering to build this traveling structure of holiness that we bring with us wherever we go. I would say that the chaplain, it's maybe corny to say so, but is somewhat of a hermeneutical meaning-making engineer, traveling from place to place, much like the Rabbis and the clergy of Europe back in the day, traveling from town to town to town. We walk in one room into another, into another. We meet people on their own terms and they guide us where there is wholeness and joy, where there is emptiness too. We enter the emptiness and pain, not as if it were our own, but demonstrating we are capable of sitting in the mud and in the muck with a being that cannot rise from wherever they are in the moment without spiritual companionship. And I brought a midrash about that today that we can read together or on our own. In Rabbi Susan Freeman's book, and actually Rabbi Susan Freeman is part of the Esri Institute as our Director of Clinical Pastoral Education, but in her book, To Dwell in Your House, she provides a powerful example of how the presence of another can reduce pain and increase well-being. Rabbi Freeman arrived to a patient's home. Her book is all within the context of home health care. This person was off the charts in physical pain, moaning and groaning and crying out. She claimed 9 or 10 on the 1 through 10 measurement scale of pain. When Susan provided this person space and time to review life issues such as fractured relationships, disappointments, and regrets, the woman poured her heart out to her, talking about a variety of issues that had caused her great distress in her life. A balloon of emotion appeared to lose its air as she spoke. At the end of the visit, Susan again asked her about her current pain level, and surprisingly, after such shouts of agony, the woman declared, "Oh, I don't feel any pain anymore." Listening to another reduces suffering. Being met and heard is palliative. It is actually pain management. Years ago, there were a set of articles on this. I've lost track of that body of literature, but it is out there. I think we need to do more of it. Our Parshat Terumah is where each person is invited, commanded to create a mishkan, a tabernacle, a holy dwelling space together from our hearts. Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'ikhu li terumah me'at kol asher, I can't read my printer kind of, Me'et kol asher, ish yidvenu libo tikhu et terumati. Tell the Israelite people to bring me gifts. You shall accept gifts from every person whose heart is so moved. And why do we do this? We do this because a few verses later it says, Va'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Let them make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell within them or among them. I actually like among them better as a translation. Every time we are in community, we are invited to bring gifts from our hearts. These materials from the heart that we bring help us to be present to connection. What are materials from the heart? I'll just ask you that. What are materials from the heart? This Torah portion is an engineer's dream. The detail is noticeable with 13 categories of ingredients recorded and dictated that will take to build this dwelling place. The 13 categories are gold and silver and copper and dyed wool of 3 different colors, which are blue, purple, and red, and flax, and goat hair, one of the only products in this list that we may not have in our homes, animal skins, wood, olive oil, spices, and gemstones. There is rabbinic literature, especially of the mystical bent, that claims the name materials are symbolism or even a microcosm of our own body. We are this traveling holiness. We are this sacred tent of meeting where the Shekhinah, divine presence, dwells. While there is meticulousness in the biblical descriptions regarding the required building specifications, there are still debated architectural ambiguities. We can meet people who say, it's clear, this is what it looks like. We can say this about the Beit HaMikdash as well. This is what the specifications are, but there are margins of ambiguity when we build something. There are measurements, there's design, there's structure, there's artistry, there's bread baking, there's cherubim, angels to carve out of gold, a menorah to shape, curtains to make for the inner sanctum, multicolored tapestries to weave. This is the interior designer's dream. There are tachash skins, the outermost waterproof covering for the tabernacle and the holy aron that contains the original Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 Commandments. And what a tachash is a mystery. It is an animal skin of a creature that sounds much like a unicorn. Talmud Bavli says, it describes this vibrant creature as a splendid, multicolored, one-horned animal that appeared to Moses just for the construction of the tabernacle and then disappeared. And the rabbis debate whether it became extinct or whether it's hiding somewhere. There's a great mystery here. Proposed symbolism, just think of a unicorn. I know I'm being sort of silly here, but it kind of gives me a feeling, with all the media and all the cartoons around unicorns. And I have a friend who loves unicorns. She gave me unicorn socks. I didn't wear them today. I was tempted. Proposed symbolism of the unicorn, though, is redemption. It's perfection. It's Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, and the perfect integration of everything hopeful, healthy, magical, and colorful life has to offer. I can feel that unicorn right now. Join me. According to the Talmud, we cannot create this literal space today. We see no unicorns. By the way, the Tachash is also translated as, we have the Chassids and the Litvaks, the literalists, the mystics, as a badger, a dolphin, or fine leather skins. We can be as practical or as mystical about our texts as we choose. But when the materials we bring are from the heart, and when we are courageous enough to offer them fully, which does take a risk, we too are vibrant and colorful. And when we think about taking a risk, we often think about being brash or speaking our minds and, a gesture at a driver on the street in, Los Angeles or elsewhere. But there are different kinds of risk that are more vibrant and more colorful and more life-giving. Sometimes, though, when we take a risk, or sometimes the prospect of taking a risk, we disappear. We just can't do it, and then we might appear again. A vignette about fear and courage, disappearing and returning again. I was sitting in my office, and a rabbinical student trainee ran into my room with an absolute look of desperation. Saw the look on her face. I asked her, "What's wrong?" She said, "I cannot go into a patient's room." That person could also be in a congregation, in anywhere that we work. It just happened to be in a hospital. She said, "I'm sorry, I can't do it. I'd like to pass this one along to a peer. I've reached a wall, and I've always told people if they reach a wall, listen to that." So she said she reached a wall. She said it would be more appropriate for me not to care for him. And of course, and I asked why, and when I asked why, she said, "I am terrified of being rejected. I am a female rabbinical student, and he is a Jordanian Palestinian Muslim man." I nodded, and we shared a moment of silence, and then I asked, "If the tables were turned and you were the one on the bed, would you want him to decide not to enter your room?" She kind of looked at me with frustration. It's not infrequent that, clergy and students roll their eyes at some of my questions. It was one of those moments. And she said, "Give me a minute." In an annoyed way, "I'll be right back." I said, "All right, that's fine." An hour later, she returned, and I asked, "Hey, what's going on?" She then informed me that she gained the courage to enter the room. She said she told the man that she was hesitant to meet him due to their respective identities, and she didn't want to offend or bring fear to him. As his family surrounded his bed overhearing the conversation, he responded to her idea of offense and said, "On the contrary, you are family and God sent you to us. You are who I need, who we need. If I were in Jordan, this miracle would not have happened." When she shared this with me, we wept in my office together for a moment. Offering ourselves can feel and actually be risky, and sometimes we don't even know what materials we have to bring, or we're terrified to bring them. Chaplaincy maintains extensive structure and specification, like the building of the Mishkan, standards and rules, maybe even drier than building the Mishkan. And yet, like the biblical narrative, we cannot predict what the end results will be. But the tent does not collapse when people refuse our care or when we reach a wall and we can't risk it. When they do refuse, this could be the most empowerment that they've had in months and months, if not years, just to say no. So the tent does not collapse, and we take it down for a time as we regroup and we travel onward. There are no permanently structured boundaries of the heart. The specifications are different, and they're related to our own growth and the parameters that were set for us and the parameters that we set for ourselves, and things that we learn that sometimes we need to hold by, and things that we learn and sometimes we need to let go of them in order to expand. The Truma offering of the heart requires no social, geographical boundary or precise location. From the perspective of Martin Buber, our offerings qualify as striving for the I-thou experience, where a reciprocity of compassion and empathy is pure. It may also be much like, I bet I have some therapists in the room. It may also be much like Carl Rogers' unconditional positive regard, creating safety and nurturing through a non-judgmental stance of acceptance. These models, though, are not merely technique-based. Their own architectural specifications require and demand the presence of mutuality and authenticity. Rabbinic thinkers generally agreed that the Mishkan was more about the process of building and the heart-filled giving to construct it than it was about this traveling tent itself. So this week marks the beginning of 13 entire chapters that describe this construction process of this holy space. This moment in text actually marks a very significant transition in the biblical narrative. And here's the transition. Preceding this, the divine-led miraculous events that granted freedom in the Exodus are now transitioning to human and heart-led processes of creating a symbolic moving place of sustained holiness. Now, the presence of God recedes a bit in the text from being the sole and solo provider of holiness to leaving room for human creators to bring presence upon themselves together. Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, in his book, The Triumph of Life, poses that as human power and capacity reach unparalleled levels of potential in our time, God recedes from us. Some people don't like this idea. But God recedes from us, creating room for us to harness increasing levels of responsibility to heal and repair the world. Rabbi Greenberg poses that covenant has moved from a place of divine intervention in which God is acting in history to removing God's self from historical intervention. The Torah is telling us now for the first time, and this is the transition in this parsha, you do it. I am here, but it is imperative for you to do it. Materials for change, angels, and what lies between. So protecting the Aron are the two golden angels, the cherubim, the chuvim. And the book of Exodus states that the cherubim are facing each other. But then the Talmud comes through and claims that when people were not aligned in community, the angel would face away from each other, one from the other, as a symbol of this communal misalignment. But when the Israelites were aligned, the Cheruvim would face each other, and God would dwell in between them. These two angels facing each other, and now we're talking about what lies in between. God would dwell between them. I have to get this little line in here. What do we mean by God? Maybe invite me back if you want, I don't know. Let's simply call it presence. I think that's really important. That is so important to my spiritual framework, for the sake of this drash. Try saying the Shema sometime in English. Say it in Hebrew, say it in English, say it in both. And think of presence or say presence instead of Adonai. Try it out as a meditation. It might be interesting for you. What lies between us when facing one another is the material for change. We know that encounters make a difference. This is nothing new. I know that I'm standing before very experienced individuals. Perhaps we are simply reminded that our physical beings, and more so our interchanges through them, are the actual tents of holiness and divine dwelling presence. And so I'm going to end with a quote from Maimonides, the Rambam. In his Igarot HaRambam. And with regards to your question about the nations, and I'm going to translate this differently now. Instead of the nations, I'm going to say, and with regards to your question about all people, know this: God desires the heart. Presence desires the heart. And following the intent of the heart, those and only those are the things that count. Shabbat Shalom.